I'm the secretary. Oh, thank you, Mike. I'm the secretary of the West Virginia Environmental Council. I'm working on planning this year's 2025 E-Day at the state capitol, along with some other great folks who you'll hear from tonight. Okay. All right, so tonight we are going to get into Advocacy 101 and why it's important to talk with your legislators. I know it can be kind of intimidating to meet with legislators or navigate the legislative process, but we're here to help you with that. We don't want it to be a scary process. Hopefully you'll have all your questions answered tonight so you feel confident enough to go and meet with your legislators. Yep. And E-Day is March 17th, so hopefully we can get meetings set up with your legislators before E-Day, but if not, we will be available at the Capitol during E-Day to help you with that as well. Okay, and just a quick look at the agenda for tonight. So we'll discuss why it's important to advocate, some terms and procedures, such as getting a bill passed, how to set up a meeting with your legislator, what to say at that meeting, how to follow up with your legislator, and then Lucia Valentine will give us a legislative update. And there will be a Q&A at the end. So if you have questions during any of the presentation, feel free to just throw it in the chat and we'll get to it at the end. Okay, so why is it important to advocate? I saw that Jim Coates was on this call, so I wanted to throw out a quick little tidbit that he gave to me during my time at WVU with him. I think it's very easy to get into a pessimistic mindset, especially right now with some of the current legislation that's being proposed. And Jim Coates, Dr. Coates always told me that you can't give up because that's what the big guys want is they want you to quit and they, you just have to keep fighting. So that's just my little spiel about why I feel like it's important to advocate. We also, you want to let your elected officials know our opinion. It's also important because legislators don't have time to research every bill that's put in front of them. So they rely on experts and people like us who are knowledgeable about things going on in environmental science to kind of inform them on the bills that they're proposing and just, let them know how we feel. And so, we want to advocate for stopping bad bills and getting good bills passed. And Lucia will kind of touch on some of that later. And Mike or Maria, if you would like to add anything to this slide, please feel free.
Thanks, Jenna. Appreciate your intro, and thanks everyone for being here. My name is Maria Russo. I'm the policy specialist at West Virginia Rivers Coalition. I was formerly a lobbyist with West Virginia Environmental Council, and you'll be hearing with one of their awesome lobbyists, Lucia Valentine, later this evening, like Jenna said. So this is really meant to be a collaborative webinar for us to, share knowledge and hear from you all too. So we did a member survey, an advocacy survey, a little while back, and what we gathered from this survey, going off of what Jenna stated of how important advocacy can be, we also know that many folks are already advocating in their day-to-day work. The experiences and the conversations that we're having make us advocates because we know best about our communities. And so advocacy is really an opportunity to then take those experiences that we know about and communicate them to our legislators. So, a lot of people have positive experiences with that, and some people experience some challenges and frustration. People may feel that their elected officials don't listen or that the system seems rigged. But I believe, a piece of information I got, a piece of advice when I was a lobbyist is that there's always something to find in common with a legislator. You just have to figure out what it is. that advice might have also been from Dr. Coatson, who's on the call. So we all have some nuggets of wisdom from Jim. But whether that's kayaking or Blackwater Falls or whatever it may be, there's something that you'll be able to find in common with someone, and it's really about bringing that human experience to the advocacy realm. And we also want to make sure that that we'll be there every step of the way to support you in that journey in making your advocacy efforts. So the next piece I wanted to talk about is that advocacy also really takes time. Many of us in the field of work know that. This is a map showing the range of time, and it's even more extensive than this in both directions. But this is the timeline that it took to pass the PFAS Protection Act, which you see right down the middle. It passed in 2023. And you can really see that there was buildup before that. There was a Senate concurrent resolution. There were source water study results, which provided us with data. We then were able to create some materials to take to our legislators. We passed the act. And then there's a lot of action that happens afterwards, too, to make sure that legislation gets implemented and to make sure it gets implemented fairly across the entire state. So sometimes we only see the end result of advocacy, but we can't forget that it really takes a series of actions over a long period of time to make this work happen. The other piece we wanted to call out is the inside-outside game. So we talk about this a lot. The inside game is the folks who, during the legislative session, have boots on the ground every day. They are our elected officials. They're also policy advocates. There are lobbyists. There are people who, are kind of marching the halls maybe every day, or maybe it's folks on this call like us who are going to E-Day and are going to show up and be there for one very important day to communicate our message. But it's really happening under that gold dome. And it takes so many of us to carry that message there to the Capitol building. And then there's also the outside game, which is just as important. And they actually help inform each other quite a bit as well. The outside game includes community organizers, activists, advocates. It might be rallies that you held or events in your town that then we're communicating to legislators. It's also news stories. I just heard from someone today that they're working on some op-eds, opinion editorials, and those kinds of tools can help inform the inside game at the Capitol. So these really play off of each other. And my big thing is, find your strength, find the thing that speaks to you about the inside game or the outside game, and go with that because it's going to help build the movement overall. Awesome. Now we're getting into the nitty gritty. So some terms and procedures about the West Virginia legislative session. Every person in West Virginia has 2 senators, and there are 34 total. And then you only have 1 delegate because there are 100 delegate districts. So that makes 134 legislators in total in both chambers. And to pass a law, legislation is first introduced. It's either introduced in the Senate or the House. And then it has to move through the chamber it's introduced in and then get passed over to the other side. So if it's introduced in the Senate, it has to complete that process, be passed over to the House, and then it goes on to the governor to sign. A really key place for us to kind of intervene or get involved for advocacy is in committee. So all bills are referenced to committee. To various committees. They can be sent to one committee for review. They can be sent to multiple committees for review. And it's really a great advocacy opportunity because a lot of times each committee will have 10 to 12 members in it around there. And so you'll really have an opportunity to have a smaller audience to speak to the nitty gritty of the bill and to really pull it apart. And this year, in the House of Delegates, there are new rules. So the bill actually has to be presented multiple days in committee in order for it to pass out of that committee. So that's a new rule that we're grappling with this year. But again, it gives us another point of engagement with that bill. Once it moves out of committee, the bill moves on to the floor, and it's read for 3 days. And all of this is assuming that they don't pass any rule changes. So sometimes you'll see a bill that, is supposed to be read for 3 days, but they'll change the rules for certain bills and they all have to vote on that. And we'll see it move a little bit faster. We can never really anticipate when that happens, but it does take place. And so we just kind of have to stay on our feet and watch bills once they hit the House or Senate floor. A very important day during the 60-day legislative session is crossover day. So that is a day where this year it's happening on March 30th, and it means that the bill has to move out of the chamber of origin. So what that means is if it was introduced in the Senate, it has to have cleared the whole Senate process, committees and the floor process, and have made it to the House, the other side, by March 30th. And then the last day of session this year is April 12th. And again, as I stated, they can and do change the procedures. And another important thing to remember is that bills have been alive up until midnight on the last day of session. So as somebody once told me, nothing's ever over until it's over. So we really, we make sure to stay on our toes through the duration of the legislative session, because a lot can change on a dime on these very busy days. All right. And then I know a lot of you tonight have joined because you either have been involved or you're looking to get more involved. And one thing we talk about a lot is the advocacy pyramid, or the ladder of engagement, that we like to call it. That means that there are steps or different areas that you can get engaged with. Some of those look like one-on-one meetings with your legislator. Others look like calls or sending emails. There's also digital advocacy that may be from social media that you see, applying kind of public pressure, or it might be sending an action alert, or us sending an action alert and you, ultimately sending an email to your legislator. So there's a lot of different forms of engagement and awareness and education that we do on these bills that are so required. And like I stated earlier, it's really important to play to your strengths. If you are an incredible, person talking on the phone, if that's really what your jam is, then I encourage you to pick up the phone, make a call. If a one-on-one meeting, it really suits your needs, that's a great place to get involved. So, we really just talk about the importance of engaging in whatever way feels most comfortable to you and most aligned with your goals. All right, so you're planning E-Day and you're ready to meet. How do you actually go about setting up your meeting? You want to make sure to try to set up the meeting as soon as possible. That's because a lot of schedules, especially really any point in session, can be pretty full. And so you want to try to reach out as soon as possible. So if you know you'll be there on March 17th, it's great to begin reaching out now. And also be persistent. It may take a couple tries to get meetings with your legislators. One thing to note is that senators do have staff, so they often have office staff. So if you call their numbers, you may actually talk to a receptionist or staff who may field the call and take a message for the senators. But delegates usually do not have staff. So if you're reaching out to them, you may see a little bit slower response time because they are managing a lot of the work on their own. So that's really why we say be persistent, keep following up. If you sent an email, maybe circle back. And we are going to drop a link in the chat to make sure you know how to find your legislators. And all of their contact information is on the West Virginia Legislative website. So that is there for you to use, and we encourage you to get in touch. And one thing I wanted to note, and I know other folks will be talking about it later, if you register for Environmental Day at the Capitol, or if you already have, we can help you get in touch with your legislators. I know sometimes that can be a tricky process, and sometimes our folks there on the ground are able to get meetings set up a little bit more easily. So if that's something we can help you with, make sure to fill out that registration form so that we can assist you with that. All right, so that's all of the prep for before E-Day. But what do you actually do when you get there? And I just had someone bring this question as well. You know, they said, I'm not really sure I know how to lobby, or I don't really know how to talk to my legislator. And it's really simple. It's just about finding that human connection, and letting them know who you are. That's the most important part. So, know your story. Why are you showing up? Why did you travel to the state capitol to come and talk to them? What's your why? Why are you committed to this issue? And what do you know about it? Another key piece to note is to always be on time. People may be rushing between meetings or between committees. And we, of course, always ask you to be polite, because that's going to be the most receptive way. You know, your legislator will be the most receptive if you're able to meet them on a human to human level, and just really take your time to explain your points and explain to them in a kind way why you have committed to showing up in their office that day. And you also don't have much time, so you have to be concise and be wise with what you're sharing. Just make sure to get to your point, and it always helps to have those written down so that you make sure to touch all of those during the meeting. And again, tell your story. First, you have to know your story, and then make sure to communicate it wisely. You may go around the room if you have multiple folks with you and do introductions, and maybe just a couple one sentence about why you're showing up and why this issue is very important to you and your community. Have your 1 to 3 concerns, as we discussed. Make sure to have those written down so that you can make sure to check them off by the end of your meeting. And the most important thing, or one of the most important things, is to always make an ask. If you know it's up for, it has already been introduced and your senator or delegate will be seeing it soon, make the ask. Say, I ask that you reject House Bill dot 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 because dot dot dot. That's a really good way to set it up for them, because they'll hear really clearly your position and what you're asking of them. They get a lot of information downloads day to day, and so it's really important to just clearly state what your ask is, and then give them a takeaway. Maybe leave them with something, like I said, about I'm really here because I care about X and Y and Z. And so really connecting with them and letting them know that you'll be back. And that's the other piece of it. I think my last note is about following up. And on that note, I'm going to pass it over to Mike, because you thank them for the meeting and follow up, which Mike does so well. So Mike, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Maria. Those were great presentations. Unfortunately, once you do the meeting, it's not quite over. Follow-up is very important. Send them a thank you note. If you have the time and the interest, a handwritten mailed note is the best, but an email is fine. I met with a senator last week and sent him an email, and we've had some back and forth since then. So email is fine. This is also an opportunity to follow up and answer any questions or issues that are raised in the meeting that you have with the senator or the delegate. You know, everybody has this dread when they go to a meeting, is that you'll be asked a question you can't answer. And you're sitting there and blank faced, and you're just trying desperately to come up with something, and you look a little like that. But this is actually the best thing that can happen to you at a meeting. Welcome a question you don't know the answer to. First of all, don't make up, don't try to wiggle through it. Just say, that's an excellent question. I don't know the answer, but I will get you the answer. And the reason for that, it's an automatic second contact with that delegate or senator. Senator Jones, Delegate Jones, I looked up the question you had, and here's some information that might be useful to you. You've just sent them another email. Or you can let us know the question. We can help you follow up with it. And again, and they've been saying this, but we will help you set up the meeting, help you formulate your ask. We'll have materials that you can use. So we're happy to help you in any way that we can. And the goal that we want is we want everybody to say, hey, I attended E-Day. I actually talked to my representative. And I'll just add these skill sets and this way of setting up meetings and what to say at a meeting. You can set up a meeting in the district at a time that they're not in session, where you can go to Charleston at times that not E-Day and have a meeting. And you'll be able to celebrate that you actually were able to talk to your representative and be part of this process. So that's the conclusion of the follow-up part. So now I'm going to introduce one of E-Council, West Virginia Environmental Council's lobbyist, Lucia Valentine. She's been doing it for 4 years, I believe now. And she'll share with us an update on what's been happening in the first 14 days of the legislature and some of the bills that that E-Council and other groups are watching. So welcome, Lucia.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's great to be on the call with you this evening. As Mike stated, my name is Lucia Valentine, and I'm the lobbyist for the West Virginia Environmental Council, which is a organization that represents several environmental groups across the state, including West Virginia Rivers and other folks on this call. So it's really great to be in community. And I'm going to go over a few legislative updates on the bills that we are following out of our priority list this year. Some of them are reintroduced from last year, so you might be a little bit familiar with them, but I'm going to go ahead and start with the Community Air Monitoring Bill, Senate Bill 575, that's been reintroduced in the Senate. So this bill has been reintroduced in the Senate and referred to the Committee on Government Organization, with Senator Tarr as the lead sponsor this year. And we were successful in defeating this bill last year, but it's come back again, supported by industry. And basically, we have been educating lawmakers on the importance of supporting the ongoing use of community air monitoring programs across the state, as they promote, a greater interaction between state agencies and the public. And so these programs complement the work of our state agencies like the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection and the air monitors that they have up across the state, by providing essential air data to inform investigations that aid in the implementation of the Clean Air Act. And so essentially this bill seeks to define what data can or cannot be used by the Department of Environmental Protection for regulatory purposes. However, our argument is that this is already law under the Clean Air Act, and so this bill is basically a do-nothing bill which has harmful messaging towards the success and implementation of our community air monitoring programs thus far. So this is one that we're watching, and we are sharing with senators right now why this bill didn't move last year and why it's important to defeat it again so that we can protect the value of the community air monitoring programs that are going up across the state. The next bill is the Orphan Well Prevention Act, which is Senate Bill 11. This has been reintroduced by President Smith this year, and referred to Senate Energy. So this is a bill that we've been working on for multiple years, which would address our orphan well crisis in West Virginia. We have over 6,500 orphan wells across the state, which leak methane and not only pose public health risks, but environmental risks as well. And so this bill is important because it would require oil and gas companies to set money away up front to cover the cost of plugging later down the line, because essentially as these wells are being drilled and oil and gas companies go out of business or forfeit their bonds, the cost to plug these wells is falling to the taxpayers. So we want to make sure that the oil and gas industry is being more responsible, putting this money away up front so that there's a fund to cover the cost of plugging so that it doesn't fall to the West Virginia taxpayers. Another component of this bill is that West Virginia has been eligible for federal well plugging money, and we need to pass legislation to qualify for the remaining 142 million roundabout number of federal well plugging money that is still available to the state. So we need to show legislative progress, regulatory progress in order to take full advantage of those funds and adequately plug the wells that are across the state. So again, this has been referred to the Senate Energy Committee. We are hoping with President Smith now on the bill that it will run this year. So we're going to be advocating that it actually hits the committee agenda this year and hopefully makes its way to the floor. Another bill that we're following alongside one of our public lands priorities is a bill that we're calling Timbering on State Parks, which is Senate Bill 224. It's been introduced by Senator Woodrum and referred to the Natural Resources Committee. This bill was also introduced last year and we were successful in defeating it. But essentially, we believe it is very broad as it could potentially open up all public lands to widespread timbering and economic development. The bill references the purpose of this legislation to address wildfire management. However, we already know that the Division of Forestry has the tools to manage wildfires and the plans in place to manage wildfires. So we are really looking at the economic development contracts that are potentially allowed through this bill, and the fact that it's just way too broad that it would open up our state parks and forests to timbering, which we're super against. So we've been working with the Natural Resources Committee. Mike Jones and some other advocates joined us at the Capitol the other day to meet with Senator Maynard and a few of our other public land senators to make sure that we're expressing concern for this bill so that we can hopefully defeat it again, or at least get it amended to be less broad and actually deal with the issue that they're trying to address. So that's Senate Bill 224. And then moving along to economic incentives for data centers, Senate Bill 583 has been introduced and referred to the Senate Economic Development Committee and then the Finance Committee. We are watching this bill as it would create economic incentives for data centers to locate within West Virginia by doing a couple of things. Number one, being providing an exemption from the B&O tax for all coal-generated electricity sold to the data center. So they're basically prioritizing coal-powered energy to power these data centers. And it also provides a sales tax for all personal property sold to the use of these data centers. So if a private citizen sells their land for the development or the maintenance of a data center, they would get a sales tax exemption. So there's a lot of conversation around data centers in West Virginia right now in general. We're hearing that this is a priority of the governor to have these located and sited throughout West Virginia. So we are just monitoring this bill and of course have concerns around the prioritization of coal-fired power for these data centers. The next bill that we're following deals with net metering, House Bill 2568. This bill would completely eliminate net metering, and so we are against this bill as we're working to uphold the full net metering rate, which is similar to our fight last year. We have got word that there's not a high chance of this running at the moment, so we're trying to advocate against it, but we're going to be continuing to watch it to make sure that we can protect net metering, especially as it relates to some of the renewable energy projects that we're trying to get online. And then lastly, the Above Ground Storage Tank Act, which most of you on this call are probably familiar with. This is an act that was passed unanimously and following the 2014 chemical spill that left West Virginians without clean water. And so for the past 10 or so years, industry has been trying to roll back this act to deregulate oil and gas tanks across the state, which further harms our drinking water, puts our drinking water sources at risk. So this is a bill that we've been able to defeat for several years now. They did not introduce it last year, but it's being reintroduced this year with the same language as the 2022 bill. It actually just came up today and was referred to the Senate Energy Committee. So we're watching that. But essentially, this bill would roll back regulations for the tanks located in zones of critical concern, which are over 700 tanks that are located closest to our drinking water intakes. So this is one of the last pieces of regulation that remain from this act since it's been rolled back so many times. And again, these are tanks that are located closest to our drinking water sources. And God forbid, if they were to spill again, they could contaminate our drinking water within just a couple of hours. So this is one that we are really going to be watching and advocating against Again, this is something that we've fought for several years now to maintain the regulations for tanks in zones of critical concern. And we're really going to be speaking out to make sure that we are protecting our drinking water, which is such an issue for so many parts of the state right now. And so just to think about introducing a bill like this is really, really harmful and concerning. So we need to make sure that we're prioritizing clean drinking water, as many of you know. So that's just a very brief overview of a couple bills that we're following. Happy to take questions at any time, or if there's any other ones that folks want to raise, feel free.
Great. Thank you, Lucia. And we'll turn to question and answer here in just a minute. But do want to encourage everybody to sign up for E-Day. There's a couple of different ways. Jenna just put into the chat how to find your legislator. Appreciate that. And we'll put the registration link for E-Day in there as well, which we just did. Thanks again. And these slides, all the links are live, so you can look at the bills that Lucia was just talking about, register for E-Day, find your legislator, but we are providing that here. So at this point, it's your turn. We're going to open this up to any reflections, questions, comments that you have. You can ask general questions, or you can ask questions specifically to somebody. Like if you have a question about a bill, Lucia might be able to answer it. I'm going to stop sharing this. We've got a nice sized group, so we can do this kind of informally. There's been not really any questions in the chat. There was a comment about mentioning a lawsuit. And that's really something we can't talk about. So we're not going to be able to answer any questions for that. But there also was a comment, and thank you, Ed, for this, that the slide about the PFAS shows the long-term and the success of the advocacy that goes along with it. We'll start off with Marika's question: are you following SB 281 and the apparently related SB 107? Those are the two bills that are filed that would severely limit certain conservation easements. And Lucia, do you have anything you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, thank you for raising that. We've been following this bill, and one of my colleagues with the Nature Conservancy, David Zilanka, has been working on this bill. We are opposed to it, and just in general opposed to any bills that would limit basically landowners' rights and making it harder for them to enter into these easements or agreements. There's been movement to try to restrict the incentivization of these programs and things like that. So it is on our radar.
Thank you, Lucia. We can do this very informally. Raise your hand or just come off mute if you have a question, and we're happy to do our best to try to answer it. Jim Coatson, the world famous person that's been mentioned several times so far. And what's in your mind, Jim?
I was looking over that net metering bill, and as someone who's got solar panels on my roof, what does repealing that section do? Does that mean that I'm not going to be able to net meter my solar panels?
That's my understanding. It would completely eliminate net metering.
I'm again that.
Marguerite has a very interesting question, which I think is also for Lucia. I know you're in nonpartisan groups, but I'm wondering how receptive our Republican legislators are, since environmental issues are typically more of a Democratic Party cause.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and really something that we take into account when creating our strategy. And I would say that, kind of building off what Maria said earlier, leading with trying to find common ground with folks is really important. And, a lot of times we do a lot of research on who we're going to meet with and, the districts that these Republicans live in. What are some of the environmental issues that they're facing in their district? Do they have clean drinking water? Do they have heavy industry in their districts? Are they from, the coal field parts of West Virginia? Do they have oil and gas? Those kinds of things. So really try to figure out where their priorities lie and some of the things that they're affected by. And I think also another thing that we're seeing with this supermajority is, kind of these factions develop. And so it becomes a little bit easier to identify out of the Republicans who are more likely to care about our issues or at least sympathize with the need to protect drinking water and clean air and things like that. And making sure we're talking about it in a high level way like that, making sure people know, everyone deserves access to clean drinking water. Everyone deserves access to clean air. Everyone agrees that we need lower electricity rates. So really just trying to find that common ground and talk about it in a way where we can relate to one another and hopefully make some progress where things aren't so politicized and it's not just this scary conversation about climate change or the big buzzwords that have politicized this movement.
Yeah, I'd like to add to what Lucia said. I work a lot in public lands advocacy, and public lands are very popular. You
Mhm.
know, Blackwater Falls doesn't really care what political party you go to. It's a beautiful waterfall and a great state park. And by talking in those kind of terms and those common interests and common values, I think that we can make a lot of progress without getting caught up in in some of the back and forth that certain terms or issues might do. Let me read Kelly's question here.
Mike, I just wanted to add one quick thing about
Oh,
that
sure.
comment too. And I showed a slide earlier about the timeline of the PFAS Protection Act and that it really took a long time to advocate. And we like to remind people that's a really good example of a bill that, folks across the political spectrum, that was very bipartisan. And so people really do, we found that a lot of our conversations that we were having with legislators revolved around their community and their family, and that they wanted clean drinking water for their people. And so we were able to bring maps to show where exactly the PFAS contamination was across the state and how many tens of thousands of people were impacted by said systems. And so it was really a way to reach across any partisan divide and really just talk to people on a level that like to meet them where they were at and to hear their concerns. And so I think there is a lot more room for that. We had over 80% of the House vote. We had only 9 no votes in the 100-member House for the PFAS Protection Act. So that's a really good example of, we can a lot of times push past the partisan piece and really just focus on good legislation that can support West Virginians.
Thanks for adding that, Maria. Appreciate it. Kelly's question. First one is about how much time do you get with your representative? I can answer that pretty quickly. That's really depends on the representative and how busy they are. You should figure you're going to get 15 to 20 minutes probably. And Maria and Lucia, you can jump in if you have a different opinion about that. But the second question, ask Maria to maybe take a shot at first, which is when calling or mailing or talking to them in person, aside from stating whether they should support or oppose, how useful is it to provide statistics and information as to why?
That's a good question. I would say one thing to remember is that legislators have very little time. And so if you have a really, really long email that has tons and tons of data, the likelihood that they're going to leaf through it is pretty low. I would say if you can link anything in your email, that's a really good way to do it, because then they can come back to it and look at it later and may be able to find more information. Or, if you have one really important piece of data that you want to drive home, maybe center your email around that specifically. And then you can always offer at the end of your email too, your reply. If you are interested in more information, I look forward to sharing it with you. Or if you meet with them in person, definitely having more information then, because they'll likely ask you more follow-up questions. So really gearing towards trying to talk to them more down the line and provide information maybe at that point in the conversation. But Lucia, anything to add? Any insight?
No, I agree. I agree. And I had someone today ask me actually, somewhat related, about the vaccine bill that was moving through the House. It's already passed the Senate. So another issue area, but they were like, is it too late to reach out? Should I still call my legislator? Should I still email them? And there is still time on the House before that particular bill reaches a vote. But I always say, to reach out, no matter whether or not you think it's going to make a difference, because they do need to be hearing from their constituents, and whether or not you're supporting them or opposing them, they need to know that, there is a perspective out there that's different from theirs. And especially if you're their constituent, they're really going to take that into more consideration. And so um, always make sure that, you're calling or you're emailing, no matter whether or not it feels like it's going to make a difference at the time.
And Ed added a kind of a follow-up when you were talking, Maria, about maybe focusing on one piece of information and having a link. He wanted to just kind of clarify, is that like a summary and then you have a link to it rather than have 30 reasons, have one really good reason?
Exactly. I think that's a great way to do it. Just anything they can digest in a few minutes. The other thing that I'll say is really useful if you have pictures or if you have a graph or a map that shows kind of where you're talking about, because that they can see a lot of information in a really short amount of time. And again, it's about kind of catching their attention before they're on to the next piece of legislation. So that can be a really good way. Like if you have 30 pieces of information, but you don't want a super long email, think about how you can get creative about how to present that to them so that they can really digest it and hopefully be able to engage in deeper conversation with you around that.
Does anybody else have any other questions or comments?
I know that
Well,
Than put one more bill in the chat too, and I just wanted to lift that up. This is a bill, House Bill 2493. It's an attack on science for public health and conservation. It has kind of vague language to take away from the state's regulatory power. So this is a bill that we're watching. We were put on alert about this by a partner group, and Than said he's happy to answer any more questions. Than Hitt is our senior scientist at West Virginia Rivers and is happy to take any additional questions or even follow up with you after about that bill. Lucia, I'm not sure if you've heard anything about that on the Capitol grounds, but it's something we just came up on our radar.
Yeah, I did meet with Delegate Rohrbach a few days ago, I guess at the end of last week, and he's a sponsor on the bill. So just asked him a little bit about the impetus for the bill and some of the concerns that we had. So it's definitely one that we'll keep following.
Nicole has a question. How should we approach advocating for a bill we know is coming to a vote at some point, but is not yet through the committee?
Sorry, 1 second, my car alarm started going off. I got distracted. How should we approach that? So this is a good question. For example, we had kind of heard rumors that the Above Ground Storage Tank Act or the Community Air Monitoring Bill was coming back this year, but we really hadn't seen it get introduced yet. And so we wanted to really, I think it's important to get a head start in raising awareness for a bill, especially if it's one that you're going to be opposing. But it's also important to kind of weigh that with how much attention you should bring to something before it's actually, moving. So that's something to strategize about. And I'm gonna have to pause for now because my car is going off. 1 second.
Thanks, Lucia. I would add to that, if it hadn't gone to the committee yet, that's an excellent opportunity to contact the 10 or 12 members of the committee that says, hey, this bill is before your committee. I'm for it for this reason. I'm against it for that reason. So advocacy isn't just, talking to the whole Senate or the whole House of Delegates the day of a vote on the final passage. It's talking to your delegate and senator building that relationship. It's talking to the committee that's going to handle it. It's talking, and then ultimately addressing perhaps the entire Senate and House. Maria, do you have anything to add to that?
Nope, I think you all covered it.
Okay. Well, again, does anybody else have any questions? Appreciate these last couple. Fan bringing it to attention to Bill and Cole's question. Anybody else have any questions? Again, let me encourage you all to figure out how to talk. Oh, see what this new message is. Do you maintain a list of reference of any type where we say bills that West Virginia Rivers is concerned about? We do. There's also a weekly newsletter that comes out of West Virginia E-Council that brings updates onto that. And if you go to wvecouncil.org, I think is their website, you can sign up for that. And you also can follow, there's the sign up. Thank you. And that will let you see kind of what the status of bills are, what's moving, what's not moving, our best intelligence on what is happening in particular bills, that sort of thing. So be sure to sign up with groups like West Virginia Rivers, E-Council, some of our other groups that are here and fighting these different campaigns and battles, and to keep informed as much as possible. And if you have a question, send us an email. We'll do our best to answer it. So thanks, folks. I again encourage you to sign up for E-Day. You can come just as a participant. If you've got a group that wants to table, there's a way to sign up for it. There's the West Virginia Rivers email sign up in the chat. And I encourage you all to, pay attention to the action alerts, send the emails. Those are important, but you just can't replace calling the senator, calling the delegate, or having it knowing the question. So thank you all for attending. Thank you for your excellent questions. I look forward to seeing many of you at E-Day and as we work through this legislative session. So thank you all very much. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.